Welcome, everyone. This is the May 28th meeting of the Advisory Committee on Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights. To start the meeting off, we will just go around the room and just introduce all of ourselves for the meeting minutes. I'm going to go ahead.
My name is Katie Bryden, Vice Chair.
Anna Fellows, Chair.
Debbie Laurie, City Manager.
Ann Krieg, Community and Economic Development Director. Such a long term.
Andre Chassé, committee member.
Gabrielle Wiley, also committee member.
Catherine Robinson, committee member.
I'm Kara Pelletier, I'm the council chair.
Great, thank you so much. As we do have a quorum tonight, we'll go ahead and move on to the first agenda item. That is the approval of the April 23rd minutes. Can I get a motion?
I move to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Andrea.
Second.
Fabulous. Any discussion or changes that need to be made? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Thank you. We are going to move on to agenda number 2, which is education, and very excited to have City Council Chair Kara Pelletier with us tonight, and she's going to give us an accessibility presentation.
Hi, so thank you very much for the invitation. This is a couple of months overdue, but thank you for the flexibility in having me here. For those of you who don't know, I actually started my career in city government on this committee as a committee member. Spent a couple of years working on just sort of getting the committee up and going and figuring out how we wanted to exist in the world as a committee and what the most important things were. So today I wanted to actually dip into my day job a little bit. I work for a nonprofit that helps really large companies become disability inclusive employers. And so I spend a lot of my time advising companies how to build disability inclusive hiring programs, how to build employee resource groups, accommodations programs, everything down to supplier diversity. And so disability inclusion is something I'm really passionate about. I'm also a person with multiple non-apparent disabilities. I'm a late discovered autistic ADHDer, and I'm also a hearing aid user. I remembered it tonight, so I'll be able to hear all of you, which is great. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about sort of the basics of disability inclusion and what's required of municipalities in terms of making programs and services inclusive and accessible and welcoming to all citizens and residents. Some of this is you may already know, and some of it may be new, but it's, I think, helpful context as we think about building a Bangor that really works for everybody to keep the basics of accessibility and disability inclusion in mind. I think there are some misconceptions that small municipalities like Bangor don't have to follow certain rules. So we'll dispel some of those myths. And I'm going to apologize in advance for the number of words on some of these slides. When you're dealing with government websites and pulling information, there's a lot of extra language there that I normally wouldn't have, but I also wanted to leave some of these slides behind for you as a reference so that you can read through them. So I'm happy to answer questions as we go, or we can save questions for the end. Just interrupt me, it won't hurt my feelings. Okay. So I'm going to start with a few facts and statistics about disability. We'll look at what the ADA is and what Title II requires in municipalities, and then 7 quick and practical ways that we can actually build a culture not just of accessibility, but disability inclusion for all of our citizens and hopefully our visitors as well. So intro to disability, what is it? Since we're talking about the ADA today, I figured we'd go with the ADA's definition. There are lots of different ways to define disability. Essentially, the ADA says that a disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Major life activities are things like eating, speaking, walking, caring for yourself, working, those sorts of things. There are lots of different kinds of disabilities. Most often people think of the apparent disabilities that we can see. We think of someone using a white cane or having a service animal, that sort of thing. But the vast majority of disabilities are non-apparent, meaning you won't know someone has a disability unless they choose to disclose it to you. And oftentimes when we look at this list of disabilities, people are surprised to see things like cancer and HIV and AIDS. What we would consider chronic illnesses can also be considered disabilities if they rise to that level of substantially limiting one or more major life activities. So when we get into statistics, it's also pretty eye-opening. On the next slide, About 1 in 8 people globally has a disability. In the US, the estimate from the CDC is about 27% of adults have some type of disability. As we get older, that number goes up. Thing about disability is it's a club that anyone can join at any time. And the majority of us will experience some sort of disability in our lifetime, whether it's a permanent disability or a temporary one. And we know May, this is good timing because May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. We know that research shows that about 1 in 5 adults in the US live with a mental illness. So disability is all around us. If we look at the statistics just at this table, probably 2, maybe 3 of us have a disability, either disclosed or non-disclosed. I also think it's important to talk a little bit about what we call the social versus medical model of disability, because a lot of the things that we want to do, not just to build an accessible Bangor, but a welcoming Bangor where people feel like they belong, have to do with embracing the social model of disability. So for a long time, disability was seen through sort of the lens of a medical model, which boiled down to its very essence says that there's sort of one right or normal way to be human, and a disability is a deviation from that norm. So the goal of medicine and the person should be to fix the disability so that they can fit into society. As disability advocacy and rights movements have grown, especially in the last 3 or 4 decades, far more people are embracing what we call the social model of disability, which says that a disability is really just a mismatch between a person and society. So someone who's a wheelchair user, for example, might say, what makes me disabled is not using the wheelchair. Actually, the wheelchair is empowering. What makes me disabled is that your sidewalks don't have a curb cut. So I have to roll in the road, or I can't get from where I want to go. So in the social model of disability, the goal is to build accessible systems so that everybody has equitable access to participate in society to the full extent that they can. And so the social model of disability is really a model that embraces diversity and says there is no one right or perfect way to be human. Disability is just another form of human diversity. And so our goal is to make sure that everybody is allowed to participate and can participate fully. I always love to talk about the social model, referencing Haben Girma, who's amazing. She's the first deaf-blind woman to graduate from Harvard Law. And she says that what makes me disabled are the barriers that exist that are created by society. It's not that I'm incapable, it's that society won't let me do things. And so thinking about how do we build inclusion into every process in government, and into every city facility so that people truly can have full access. Okay, questions on the definition of disability?
Just a quick question about the use of the term disability, because I seem to remember that there's been some back and forth in past years about using the word disability or finding an alternate term to use for disability.
Good question. We have a slide on that, but I'll answer it now. Which is just to say that euphemisms like differently abled or special needs or different abilities have really fallen out of favor with the disability community. And part of that is the word disability is not a bad word. It's not pejorative. It's as just like saying left-handed, right-handed, brown hair, you know, blue eyes, that sort of thing. And so we encourage people to use the word disability and not shy away from it, because the more we use it, the more normalized it becomes.
I hate to use the term reclaiming, but it's kind of been a reclaiming from what I've seen in the groups that I'm, that I'm in and follow, is it really has kind of been a reclaiming, just like you were saying, which is it's not negative, right?
Right.
And reframing is what I see happening on there.
Yeah, very good point. So let's talk about the ADA and how it applies to municipalities. Essentially, what does the ADA do? There are multiple titles in the ADA, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, this was signed in 1990, so we're coming up on the 34th anniversary. Math is hard. And it prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in things like public accommodations. So that would be restaurants, hotels, theaters, anywhere that the public is welcome to gather and enjoy themselves. Employment, most of us are familiar with employment regulations because we are employed or know people who are. Transportation, and then things like community living. So the goal of the ADA is that people can fully and independently participate in society, that they have equality of opportunity, and very importantly, that people be self-sufficient economically, and be fully able to participate in the world's economy. So these are the slides with too many words. Let me boil it down for you. A couple things on the ADA and city government. So what is Bangor required to do? A few things. We are required to make our programs and services accessible to people with disabilities. So that means, we'll see on the next slide, everything from voting to registering a vehicle to Parks and Rec. Programs and services offered by the city have to be accessible. And that means not only physical access at our facilities here, but also to make sure that people have equity of access and participating in programs of services, things like our community and economic development, our economic development plan, right? Soliciting feedback from people. And last but not least, that we have to ensure effective communication. So in places where people need things like interpreters, sign language or ASL interpreters, deaf interpreters, captions, those sorts of things, and those things are requested, to the extent that it's possible, we need to be able to provide those services.
May I ask a question, clarification question, specifically about Parks and Rec? We had Tracy Willett here a couple of months ago talking about his program, and a question I raised was, when my children were going through there wasn't anyone to assist with neurodivergence. But now they do have something in place. The question is the continuity as people change positions, right? To what extent do we have to ensure that there is someone there who does that? What is the responsibility to that, being able to access things like that?
I think it's both ways. First of all, the responsibility is on the parent or citizen to let us know what they need with it, an advanced amount of time, in which case that we're able to make an accommodation. I think it's maybe 2 slides in, but there's some flexibility in meeting ADA requirements. So the ADA realizes that not all governments and not all entities will be able to have the requisite staffing to meet all the requests that people have. So you can have some flexibility in meeting those requirements. What we're not required to do as a city is fundamentally alter a program in order to make it accessible. For example, if Parks and Rec was holding a beach volleyball tournament and somebody said, I want to participate, but it needs to be indoors, they wouldn't be required to move the entire beach volleyball tournament indoors in order to meet that need. So it really depends on the situation. I think it's good practice for us to make sure that all of our city staff are well-versed in inclusive behaviors and how to be accommodating to needs as they arise, especially in the programs where we're dealing with kids who may not necessarily be able to advocate for themselves in the best way. So I know that's very generic and broad, but without knowing the specifics of the program, it's hard to say, yes, you would be required to do this thing or that thing.
I think basically what I'm hearing is it still requires a level of self-disclosure in
It
order to
does.
do that. Yeah.
Right. There are things, although self-disclosure, if we want to get down a rabbit hole, is really challenging because disability is still so misunderstood and stigmatized. There are a lot of people who will never self-disclose it. And so you get to the question of how do we make sure that we're meeting people's needs if we don't know what those needs are? A lot of organizations, especially in the corporate world now, are striving to develop programs and services and products using the lens of universal design. So when you build accessibility in at the beginning, then you don't have to be as worried about, does someone have to, choose to self-disclose, because hopefully the program or policy will be accessible from the beginning.
Yeah, I think back to, building that culture and the idea that more people will be identified as having some sort of disability. So at what point, where are we in that kind of, in talking about the ADA, knowing that it was developed decades ago,
Right.
that tipping point of knowing that more and more, when does it become instead of like you're saying, universal design,
Yeah.
when does it become the best interest of the community to say, yes, we need to lean into this, knowing that,
Right.
And I'm sure those are discussions, obviously, that happen within Parks and Rec and then at, the higher level.
Estimates in children are different than the CDC estimates for adults, but essentially, if we have a program that 100 kids are involved in, we should imagine and anticipate that 20 to 30 of those kids will have some sort of disability that they either choose to disclose or not. So where we can, whenever possible, building our programs so that we do embrace and accommodate as many disabilities as we can makes really good sense. Because otherwise you're leaving people out. And that's not what we want to do. Okay, next slide with too many words. This was just to share what are some of the examples of state and local government activities in which people can expect that they should have equitable access and be treated fairly under the ADA. I mentioned voting, public education, recreation, healthcare, social services, things like emergency services when we're doing emergency declarations, making sure that those declarations are accessible either through captions or through ASL interpreters, even the language that we use on our website, and in our communications. There's a push toward using plain language as much as possible so that people with intellectual disabilities or people who are dyslexic or dysgraphic have the ability to understand what's required of them and take action to keep themselves safe. So again, the ADA applies to state and local governments, even if they're small, and even if especially if they receive money from the federal government.
You want to hit the enter button, Ann?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh,
There.
yeah.
And so this is what I mentioned earlier. There is some flexibility in meeting ADA requirements. So for example, we are now undergoing a renovation of City Hall. We are adding an ADA accessible elevator that goes all the way to the basement and making some other big changes to improve the accessibility of City Hall. In general, the ADA doesn't require that absolutely every building and absolutely every restroom be fully accessible. What they do require is, to the extent possible, that you move services to accessible areas and that you advertise well in advance what is accessible and what is not. When you're doing things like renovations, if it's not burdensome from a cost perspective, I think, I'm going back to my ADA test, this may be a lie, I think it's 20%. So if making something accessible, like widening a door frame or adding an elevator, doesn't add more than 20% to the cost of the renovation, it's considered not to be burdensome. So you need to do it. And all new buildings and facilities need to be accessible to people with disabilities. But again, there's lots of ways that you can make a process accessible that don't require redesigning space. So an example would be someone might request an adjustment or accommodation. We might have a requirement that someone shows a driver's license in order to get a document of some sort. Lots of people don't have driver's licenses. Some can't because of their disability. So in that case, a pretty reasonable accommodation is to use some other form of ID in order to meet that criteria. So it's really about being reasonable. And in the case where we say to somebody, no, we can't adjust this program, how it's done, what the requirements are, that we have a really, really good reason for saying, no, we can't make that happen. Okay, so building a culture of disability inclusion. I promise this gets to your language question. So 7 things. First is to put the ADA in its place. The ADA was never meant to be the only thing you're supposed to do to build an accessible and welcoming city or employment. It is the floor, not the ceiling. It's a C, not an A+. So when we think about the ADA, yes, of course, we want to comply with, and we're legally bound to comply with the ADA, but it shouldn't be the limit of our imagination in terms of how we make cities welcoming and accessible. The second is to use inclusive language. Inclusive language goes a long way in helping to broadcast that we are intentionally trying to be a welcoming city. So there's 2 schools of thought when it comes to language. For many years, folks used person first language, saying person with a disability, person who's blind, person who is autistic. But recently, in the last 10 years, people tend more toward identity first, saying, you know, being autistic is part of who I am. I wouldn't say a person who is left-handed, I'd say a left-handed person, right? So there's identity first language saying blind person, wheelchair user, autistic. Kids on TikTok are calling themselves neurofabulous and neurospicy. So I think being committed to being inclusive is also being committed to continuous learning and to getting it wrong every once in a while and to changing your own vocabulary as the times change. So when in doubt, respect how people identify themselves. If you don't understand a term, it's okay to ask, but it's really about not treating people how you want to be treated, but treating people how they want to be treated, and language is part of that. There's some improper language out there as well. One of the things that makes me a little bit wild is seeing handicapped on signs. The term handicapped is considered outdated and pretty offensive. I ran across it in one of our city ordinances about dog walking of all things the other day, and said, when we get around to updating city ordinance again, let's remove the use of handicapped. There are still some places where we might have to keep it because the federal law still uses the word handicapped, and so we're trying to comply with that. But where we can, instead replacing handicapped with accessible parking, accessible restroom, or when we're talking about a person, either a disabled person or a person with a disability. Also, steering away from disempowering language. Suffering from mental illness is changed to living with mental illness. Somebody's not confined to a wheelchair. Again, a lot of wheelchair users say that it's something that's empowering for them. So wheelchair user as opposed to confined to a wheelchair. Also treating adults like adults, not being condescending, not assuming someone can't understand something or can't accomplish something, and then steering away from that euphemistic language, physically challenged, differently abled. Totally okay to say the word disabled. The third is to train staff and people who interact with the public on how to practice inclusive behavior. So when you're working with and interacting with the public and people with disabilities, there's certain things you shouldn't do. For example, putting your hand on somebody's wheelchair mobility device, it's considered an extension of that person. Another one is making sure you speak directly to a deaf person and not to their interpreter. So there's lots of do's and don'ts. We won't go over them all on this slide, but there's ways that you can interact with people that show respect and show again that you're trying to be inclusive. Number 4 is to develop a listening strategy. In the disability community, we have a saying, nothing about us without us. So if you're developing a program or service specifically for people with disabilities, you should include people with disabilities in that process. It seems very straightforward, but maybe you wouldn't be surprised how many times that gets missed. So building relationships intentionally with members of disability organizations in the community so that you can reach out to them and ask for their perspective, keeping in mind that one person's perspective is only that. Disability is not a monolith, and so it's helpful to speak to multiple people who are all going to have multiple perspectives based on their life experience. Number 5 is to make it easy to request modifications. So in the world of employment, we talk about reasonable accommodations, and I even found myself saying it multiple times already, even though I meant to say modifications. The language in Title II is modification, not accommodation, but you'll find the words used interchangeably. Essentially, it's make it easy for someone to ask you to change a process or a policy in order to be able to fully participate. Ideally, I know our website's undergoing a big renovation. Ideally, it would be on every page. If you need to ask for a modification to this process, here's a link or here's a number to call so that people feel not that we just sort of shove it under the rug and don't mention it, but that it is welcome for them to ask for what they need. And then the second piece of this that I didn't put on the slide is when somebody tells you what they need, believe them. Because that's an important piece of it too. Number 6 is to design with accessibility in mind. It's really hard to add the eggs at the end, baking a cake. So when you are thinking about new programs and services, asking yourself at the very beginning in the development world, it's at the left-hand side of development. Start here with accessibility, don't get all the way to the end and then think, oh, what about disability, accessibility and inclusion? It'll be hard to go back and change it. It's a lot less expensive and time consuming to just build steps into your development process to do accessibility checks, start to finish. And then the last is to go, again, thinking about the ADA as the floor and not the ceiling. How do we move from a compliance culture to a culture that's actually welcoming and inclusive? How can we include and celebrate people with disabilities in all of these places? You know, do we have any monuments or memorials in the city of Bangor for important citizens with disabilities? I don't know. It'd be nice if we did. When we're doing proclamations, do we do proclamations for things like the International Day of Persons with Disabilities? How about our library programs? Can we celebrate disability through a reading program at a specific month? When we're building our public health and senior citizen programs, are we thinking about the role that disability inclusion plays? Because again, anywhere you have a group of people, you have people with disabilities. And so proactively looking for ways to talk about disability, normalize the conversation, include people and celebrate people as valued and equal members of the community also makes it that much easier for someone to feel like it's okay to ask for what they need in terms of modifications. Got it right this time. And to know that Bangor's glad that they're here. We want them to stay. That was super fast.
That was great.
That was
Yeah,
great.
so much.
Great.
Before I ask any questions, anyone have a question? Okay. I feel like you do.
I need a second, my brain is.
Yeah, she was minuting.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is a topic that's near and dear to me for a variety of reasons. But knowing that city council has taken up housing as one of its priorities, and you're talking about making individuals with disabled individuals feel welcome and included in the community. What conversations, or have there been any conversations about creating housing for individuals who may need a level or desire a level of autonomy, but not full autonomy of like an apartment, community style living? Have we looked to those building things like that? I know those are those type of style housing popular over in Europe, type thing. Any chance we could bring some of those ideas here and develop some of that here?
I would love to see someone take us up on it. So we have changed our ordinance to allow, correct me when I get it wrong. Basically almost dormitory style housing where you have individual apartments that are bedrooms and bathrooms and maybe a small kitchen, but then you also have communal gathering spaces. In some cases, you might have communal kitchens and recreational facilities. I think that would go a long way in helping people age in place, in helping people with disabilities who sometimes become, if it's a newly acquired disability, that can be cut off socially and from the community because they can't travel as much, those sorts of things to really help build communities. I think it's a wonderful way for us to find lots of different housing opportunities that meet everybody's needs as we're working with some of the developers who are also developing the low to moderate income housing. Part of that is ensuring that a certain number of those units meet accessibility standards. We talk about it a lot in terms of senior housing, but you don't have to necessarily be someone over the age of 55 to need an accessible house. So yeah, I think it's something that we should continue to push on. Again, I'd love to see a developer take us up on it and actually build something so that we have, I think as more people see how that might work and the number of residents who could benefit from it across all different spectrums of age and income, that we would see more of those being developed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm good for right now. Thank you.
I actually do have a question that kind of comes off of what you were asking. So in terms of planning, obviously we have plans for housing, which is great, but we also have a lot of current housing that desperately needs to be updated. And, most of you all know, I was looking for a place for a while. And one of the things that I kept running into was I was unable to find how a lot of housing that was accessible. My mom struggles with stairs. And so we had to have something where there was some first floor living space where she would be able to be on the first floor with minimal stairs. And there's very little available. And, you know, when I've spoken with, you know, landlords that are neighbors of mine about these issues, one of the things I say is like, we just can't afford, like as small landlords, we can't afford to do a lot of the things that we would like to do. So is the city kind of looking at maybe creating a sort of fund for not just future housing, but managing the housing that we have and investing in the housing that we have, both in terms of its quality, but also just making it more accessible?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna defer to
Sure.
our housing expert.
It's like you have a bit of ESP. So on next week's BNED committee, there is going to be the rental registry pilot that goes out.
Oh.
And one of the pieces of the pilot is how do we incentivize and create the partnership between the city, the landlords and the tenants? And one of those opportunities is to provide financial assistance to address certain things that will improve the quality and accessibility of our units. Sorry.
That's wonderful. I love it. You heard it here first.
And besides also just subsidizing landlords too, like I hope that there's also going to be consideration too as to how much income landlords are kind of gleaning from these rental properties, and are they truly being treated as commodities? Or are they being treated as a community investment? And that like, this isn't just a property that I own that I'm making money off from. This is a home that is in our community. People who live here are in our community.
Correct.
And so also looking at like the income issues as well.
That's information we share in the packet as well. And it will be part of the consideration as to when and what level of financial assistance the city may consider.
Okay,
Because what we want to do is to improve the overall quality of the housing stock, ensure that our properties are up to code, that they're safe and that they're accessible.
Yeah.
It is a partnership.
Okay.
And it is not, you know, a one-sided conversation, and that's why the program is set up with a funding mechanism to help ensure it remains a partnership.
okay. Thank you.
I just want to ask a quick clarifying question about the rental registry. Is it your intent that when someone's on this registry,
Mhm.
that there will be something that indicates if it's accessible or not? Or is there gonna be some, like a description of the property, like, because that would be something that would be helpful to people who are looking, right? Is there some sort of descriptor about if it's accessible or not?
So this is a pilot program, because where we're gonna get the full information about what is likely available as for the number of units and condition is part of the citywide revaluation that's underway. What we heard in all of the outreach and talking to tenants, landlords, property managers, everybody, was that, to your point, a lot of the smaller landlords are saying, you know, hey, we want to be part of the community, but it's a struggle for us. So how do we start building that partnership? So it does, at first, we're asking for, just tell us how many units you have, what the address is. Here's a checklist you can use to kind of identify, do you have all of these things in place? If not, what can we do? It will not. So it's gonna be a 2-year pilot. Hopefully, we will learn things and we'll be able to retool things as we move forward with the project. To sit here today and think we're gonna roll out all these rules and we're gonna get it right is unlikely.
Are you part of the pilot? What you do, your position?
No.
She may vote on it in a couple of weeks.
So that I think that you would be a valuable asset to that 2-year team, so I didn't know what the
Hmm.
collaboration is between the pilot, the city and your role.
So the pilot will be coming forward, so this will go to committee next week. If the Business Economic Development Committee is amenable, it'll come forward as a council order where the city council will have the opportunity to adopt and enact a pilot program. And then part of that will be the need to come back periodically to BNED and say, this is what we found, this is what we're hearing, and begin to continue to tweak those programs. But one of the particular expenditures, for example, that we identified is ensuring that a unit has meets the needs of an individual who has accessibility needs. It can be wider thresholds. It can be grab bars from a balance and stability like standpoint is how I think of it. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to kind of help ensure that landlords are able to make units safer.
And just to clarify, Debbie, obviously the ADA will say that if it falls under the threshold of being a burden to add those things, will this registry provide subsidies for landlords to make those
The
changes?
registry won't, but we're gonna wrap in another program that will allow you to access that kind of thing, yeah.
Are you gonna tell us what that program is?
No, because then we're gonna spoil. My goodness, you're already outing all the excitement for next week.
Okay.
Check the packet.
But
Yeah.
So
They just want
I'll
you to
send
send
you a
next
link
week's
to the
meeting.
Yeah,
BMT
right.
meeting tomorrow, on Monday night.
Right.
So we are trying to be very thoughtful, collaborative and
Mhm.
comprehensive,
Mhm.
because we all do want the same thing. The
Yeah, of
vast
course.
number, we have a significant number of small landlords who all want to do the right thing.
Is
And
this-
that's what we want to encourage.
Is this program being modeled after other cities that are already implementing similar registry with this collaboration?
I don't know if that new program has,
No,
I don't think it,
yeah, we just looked at it and, what do we need? What does Bangor need?
Okay,
We really tried to look at Bangor
okay,
needs.
neat, thank you.
We've also got coming up maybe July. We have been partnering with an organization to do a housing study,
Right.
basically, that shows what do we have today and what do we need? And I would imagine some of that is going to talk about our aging population. I'm actually the median age of someone in Bangor, which is kind of a weird thing to feel, but knowing that, most people my age and older are now thinking about how do I get a smaller one-story house because I can't do stairs anymore, those sorts of things. Making sure that what we're developing and producing is going to work for the people who want to live here long term.
that's
And-
actually the second BNED meeting in June.
Great.
So even a
look
little
at that.
earlier.
Very good.
And I also wanted to add while we're on the topic, because you shared it, is I'll share it now. I would have shared it on manager updates. I hope you all saw over the weekend that Bangor Housing was awarded $6 million worth of LIHTC funding to begin the construction of the 50 units of senior housing on Sunset Avenue, and that is phase 1. They will be applying later this year for phase 2. And they have potential to add a third parcel as well that's contiguous. I will also share, now I'm doing a spoiler alert for you tomorrow night.
I love it.
Okay, I will also share that in a different phone call with folks from Main State Housing and the governor's office on policy. They shared that the city's $2 million contribution of ARPA funds really helped with scoring to ensure that that project won funding. So they
Okay.
did take that into account. So there's now the 50 units of LIHTC funding in place for the senior housing, and the LIHTC is in place for the family housing on Milford Street. So we have 2 affordable housing projects funded by Main State Housing that will be taking off, as well as the 43 units of permanent supportive housing. So that's,
Start.
it's
a really good
100,
start.
it's 130 units of
Mhm.
affordable
Yeah.
New
that are
affordable
housing,
housing.
new
Yeah.
affordable housing,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Now, if the contractors could, be magical, that would be great.
And in addition to that, I think it's tomorrow night, you have a meeting about the Grandview
Yep,
development. So we've been focused a lot on low income and affordable housing, but then there's also a whole group of people who make like 80 to 120% of the area median income, who are currently just priced out of the market, who want to move from apartments to houses or different living. And so we're going to be working off Grandview Ave to build a whole development that caters to folks in that area as well. So we're really trying to develop things that will hit everybody regardless of where their income is, and provide lots and lots more options for people to find safe housing in Bangor.
And is part of that, because I know, you know, people really, I mean, historically, it's always been about single family homes, right? And I know that for a variety of reasons, increasing density is beneficial, not only to the community, but also for public services. There's not all that much in terms of like condos and townhouses in Bangor right now. And as far as I know, there hasn't been anything new that's been built in that type of housing for a while. I can't think of anything that's been built. I think there were some condos I read about in like Brewer that were being built.
That was being built through the Affordable Home Ownership Program,
Right.
being offered through Main State Housing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, generally speaking, condos and townhouses are less expensive than single family homes and are good entry level homes for people in their first. I mean, obviously you need to find the developers that are willing to do that.
Yeah,
And it's not as profitable for them to do those types of units as it is to do single family homes, but I'm assuming that's part of the discussion.
I think the intent of the Grandview parcel is to do sort of a mixed development that might be some apartments and condos and some single family
That's
detached
great.
homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Katie, I think you had a question?
I have disability in questions, so are people?
Okay, let's go back.
Okay, all right, I don't want to
Nice
take
years
it
back.
Way back.
Well, I'm just curious, obviously, given your work and your part of conversations when we were talking about helping Bangor become an autism certified city. We've been talking about opportunities for us to train our public service members, our law enforcement about working with disabled populations. And obviously I know that employment for people with disabilities is a huge gap
Yeah.
in individuals that can and want to work versus companies that are ready to have them work there. There are plenty of nonprofits doing this work, but as people that are involved at a city level, at an advisory committee, wanting to see this change, do you have recommendations for ways that we as even citizens could have conversations with businesses, or what we could do as a part of this committee to make that change happen?
That's a really good question. So my current employer, Disability and works with like the Fortune 500s, Fortune 100, so really big companies, like name a big company off the top of your head.
I know, it's a great, do you work for because they have chapters, right? State chapters?
There are state chapters. There's not one in Maine.
Okay.
Those are affiliates.
Yeah.
Charts are,
Yeah.
I was
So I know there's less.
I would
less
be
of an awareness
very
or boots on the ground.
happy to see more of a focus on disability inclusion and some of the diversity and inclusion conferences that are happening around the state of Maine. I think what happens with most employers is it's feels very easy and friendly for them to do like gender inclusion and LGBTQ inclusion and racial and ethnic inclusion. And then disability is this big scary thing because of the ADA and accommodations, and people are worried about benefits programs and what is the cost of it and all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like in that sort of the maturity curve of businesses embracing diversity and inclusion, that disability is kind of the last on the list. Where I think it's a missed opportunity is when we think about the numbers for some companies, their group of disabled employees may be their largest constituency group within their organization, after gender. So, I would love to see more local businesses having a conversation about what does disability inclusion mean in business? Because if you have employees, you have disabled employees, so they're already there. So how do you build an environment where people can thrive, people can be highly productive and successful at work, and you as a company become better off because of it?
Right there, I mean, the research obviously exists. There's
Right.
so much research that says, employing with people with disabilities is so beneficial for your company and even as an employee working alongside someone with a disability.
But it goes back to the difference between the medical model and the social model,
That's
right? The idea of someone doing 40 hours a week is still the standard, but when, someone else might be able to produce just as much work in 20 hours,
Yeah.
That's, I've seen that in HR offices. It's a very hard concept to wrap their head around, especially when you talk about the idea of, do you extend benefits to this person? What can they have access to, not have access to?
Right.
So to that point,
I think it's all about information sharing and education, because there is so much confusion.
well, that's what I was just gonna say. Maybe that's an opportunity to develop like a symposium, inviting not just
Yeah.
HR
Mhm.
departments in, but business owners in, who may not be hearing those conversations or those topics, realizing that it is a
Mhm.
missed opportunity, right? Even from the application. You know,
Right.
If
And
the
they-
only way you can apply is online.
Mhm.
Right.
And one of the ways sort of to get a foot in the door there is maybe to remind people now, of their experience through the pandemic with people working at home. And I know that in my HR department, the head of our HR, very skeptical
Mhm.
about letting people work from home.
Mhm.
Concerned about productivity, concerned about people goofing off, not doing their jobs.
Yeah,
And just the opposite was the result.
yeah,
To
yeah,
the point where he was skeptical before, now it's up to the employee.
yeah.
But, the
Right.
employee has a full choice whether they want to work from home or not,
Mhm.
because they're more productive.
Yeah,
Working from home.
Right.
And there's a cost savings for the industry.
right.
And so, just to use that as an example to say,
Mhm.
your mindset about disabilities may be wrong.
Right. or
Think about how you
fear-based,
thought
yeah.
about people working from home. And once you were forced to have to do that and survive as a
Mhm.
business, how did that work out? What did you learn from that experience? Just to give, let people know that start thinking about this differently, don't
Yeah,
shut the door on it right away.
So I guess, I mean, the question I have, we started on this committee together. There was a lot of conversations about trying to do autism certification, and there was a lot of questions about whether or not that filters through this committee as an outside thing, collaborating with other groups. So we kind of have moved that over here for a time being. But we're talking about, I'm not gonna say it.
municipalities.
Thank you. Trying, making sure we're developing a culture of inclusivity. Where do you think Bangor actually is? If you had to put a thermometer on it, where is the temperature on Bangor's acceptance for that?
I feel like that's like.
Wow.
I thought you were gonna be like, because I know what my thermometer
No,
says.
it's an honest question, because we've seen it in the news, we see states
Yeah.
repealing DEI, we have places that are
Yeah.
completely cutting their offices, and I know when we came in and did our report, we're like, no, we want the exact opposite, we wanna go, 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 go. But that doesn't mean
Mhm.
there isn't pushback, I mean, we all know every business can kind of do what they wanna do,
Mhm.
but if you had to gauge just with your, experience, I think there's an appetite, but that could just be the people I surround myself with.
Yeah, yeah.
So where are we as a city? Is there truly an appetite to make it inclusive?
That's a good question. I think it's different in different pockets.
Mhm.
I would say in my interactions with, if we want to talk about the city as like city staff. I experience a staff that is very much interested in and committed to inclusion. When we talk about the council, same thing, interested in and committed to inclusion. If we think about business owners, my wife is a small business owner, and so it's like, that sounds great, and I'm really busy. Right?
Yeah.
And also I have expenses as a business owner. So I think bringing the business community along, it's not that people's hearts aren't in the right place. It's that if new initiatives conflict with paying the bills and keeping the lights on, there's going to be a natural rub there. So how would we, if we wanted to become an autism certified city, for example, how could we make it as light a lift as possible so that the people who really want to participate are able to do that?
Mhm.
I think, in my experiences, this is 10, 13 years ago now, working with downtown business owners, especially on helping to build up Pride from a one-day thing to a whole week long and hang Pride flags out, and that people were very welcoming and wanted to do it. They just needed a little help in figuring out how.
Yeah,
And so I have found that to be true. Anytime we're talking about an issue of inclusion, I don't think disability inclusion would be any different.
Mhm.
Most people today have someone in their family or know somebody who is disabled. And so it's a really easy sell to say, how do we make this a Bangor where your loved one can thrive in our community? We also see lots of people participating in things like the autism walk here and organizations like Best Buddies really wanting to get involved. And so I think you have a core group of people in Bangor who would be behind you.
Yeah.
I promise that wasn't a trick question.
No, I know.
It's like teasing you.
It didn't feel like a trick
I
question.
know, I was teasing you, I was teasing you, I'm
Well,
sorry.
you know, anyone who's, as we all know, we've said it many times, which is when you're involved in this work, it's not a 1K or even a 5K, you know, it's
Mhm.
long-term, it's long-term work trying to
Right.
get change in, you know, so how measuring that is important as you're trying to go on your marathon.
Yeah.
You know, and you're trying to implement change to improve lives.
I like the idea of giving our city easy, measurable ways to at least demonstrate inclusion, like a pride flag, you know, isn't a big lift. But it obviously demonstrates, you know, a measure of welcome. There's so many ways we can do that for the disability community. Anyone have advice? Thank you.
That feels like an accessibility subcommittee.
Yeah, great, I like
that.
And let me know if you ever need help making the business case for disability inclusion. I will drop 50 pounds of research.
Yeah, no, I know, I believe you.
Yeah.
I believe that, yeah. I know that's what you do, so thank you.
Thank you all for volunteering to be part
symposium.
of this committee. I think this is one of the things that makes Bangor a special place, and I'm delighted to see the community still thriving and people participating and taking it seriously. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was
Thank you
so
for so much
informative.
coming in.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate
Come
it.
back anytime, please. We haven't lost our liveliness, as you can tell. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next one, which is a review of the community development block grant, consolidated plan, community engagement.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome to
you.
stay if you want to.
She's like, I'm here now. I get it.
Tomorrow's gonna be a long night.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
That was
Have a good
awesome.
evening.
I really appreciate it.
So as the group may know, the city is what's called an entitlement community, which means you receive funds from what's called the Community Development Block Program. Means that you have a significant population at or below the poverty line. And those funds are used to, I mean, the original intent from, you know, the beginning of this program in 1964 was to uplift communities through the infusion of funds for what's called it's an old term that we still have to use, the elimination of slum and blight. And also, I know it's a horrible term.
Yeah, I remember.
But
Yeah.
they refuse to change. And also services or investments in neighborhoods where people reside that are at or below the poverty line. So, you know, we target, you know, funds for those two areas. And also for economic development as well. So what has to happen every 5 years is we have to do something called the consolidated plan. And basically the consolidated plan is a little bit like the comprehensive plan that you all had taken a look at when we were finishing that up. And it looks at sort of the data of what we have right now in terms of demographics, where people are living. We look at all of the census data that's available. And then we go out to the neighborhoods. It's more of a neighborhood-centered approach to saying, how can we use these funds over the next 5 years to uplift? Oh, yeah, to uplift where, you know, where you are, you know, where you live, and how can we make your neighborhood better? So, so that's gonna be starting this year,
Oh,
probably.
you're talking
towards
about 5-year plan.
Yeah, the action plan. What happens with the action plan is every year. So basically, just like when we do things in zoning with the comprehensive plan, we look at the comprehensive plan to decide, you know, how we're gonna make policy changes on zoning. The consolidated plan drives the bus, if you will, on the action plan. So what you're trying to do with the 5-year plan is to take a step back and say, okay, what do we want to do over the next 5 years? Are there things that need multi-year funding? So you can do those larger projects. So you're not just looking in the sort of the tunnel vision of just a 1-year funding. We're looking at it over a 5-year time period. So, just like we did with the comprehensive plan, we're gonna be running things through this group and to have you take a look at language, making sure that we're doing the outreach that, we should be doing to make sure that we engage people in all different neighborhoods and inclusion, just like we were talking about before. Yeah, so it's an exciting project and
What's the timeline for the plan?
the timeline is, it'll probably get started later this summer, with the Community Development Division, which is fully staffed, which is wonderful, so. So they'll be, getting that started in the fall. It's usually, it takes about 6 to 9 months to do. Yeah, so you'll be hearing from us again on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. The action plan happens every year, but the consolidated plan happens every 5 years.
It's a 5-year plan.
It's a 5-year plan. Okay.
And then the action plan occurs every one of those 5 years as to the priorities for the coming year.
I was trying to get that right in my
Right.
notes and I'm like, I don't think that's what I wrote. It's like, yeah, okay. Yes, the consolidated plan is for 5 years and then the action plan is action on every one of those 5 years. Okay.
And what's great about the timing of this too is that it allows us to look at everything that we said in the comprehensive plan and the economic development strategy to go back out to the public to say, do we still believe in these things? It's a good time to kind of do a check-in on all the things that we're trying to do policy-wise.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
And you said it was gonna start in the fall or the end of
yeah,
summer?
probably August,
Late
Okay.
summer.
late
It's not
summer.
really fall.
No.
Don't
August.
put it on a
Okay.
calendar.
Are you also gonna provide us the
Yep,
housing?
And then the housing study, HR&A Associates, is the company that had done the statewide housing plan. And, they did a fantastic job on it, so we called them and say, can you take all of the work you did at the state level and distill it down to the city of Bangor? And, so we're working with them on that. They wanna come to your next meeting to kind of do a presentation of what they've learned so far to get your feedback. Because what this housing study does is, we've done a lot of studies, right? We've done the comprehensive plan, we're doing all these plans. What the housing study does is says, this is the type of housing that you need to do, whether it's, more accessible units, universal design, or is it market rate? Is it
Attached residential, which is what the condos and townhouses should
right,
be.
is it first time home buyer type, housing, what kind of rental, is it low income, is it moderate income? What are we really looking at market wise over the next, 5 years? And to give us a sense of what we can do at the city level, to take a look at things we've done. We made a lot of changes to zoning, the city has done major investments in housing projects, what else can we do? We're doing the Grandview project, what else can we do as a city to foster, good housing development? So this is more of an action plan, and it really kind of goes into the demographic, into the market, and to give us a little bit better data to work from.
Just to pan out a little bit, this is gonna happen over what period of time?
They're kind of on a fast track, so we'll have that done, July, August. I think, yeah, August is when they'll have the final
Of this year?
of this year.
Wow.
When did it start? Sorry.
What's that?
That,
It started about, what, a month
A
and a
month
half ago?
ago, yeah, a month and a
Okay.
half, yeah.
like May.
So they've been doing a lot of
April,
demographic
August.
research
Okay.
right now.
Thank you.
And
And
so when they
so-
go to the houses, they're verifying that what they have recorded.
That's different.
Oh,
So you're talking about the citywide revow.
okay,
So.
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
citywide
I'm saying the same
revaluation
thing.
is, I know, we need one more
Yeah.
thing going on. This is by a consultant who was looking at there are multiple data sources to determine what types of housing you have in your community.
Mhm.
And drilling down and saying, based on these data sources, this is what we're seeing. Here's what we're seeing happen in the market. Here's what we believe is missing based on your demographics
Got
and
it.
needs from your community.
So in some way, however, the citywide reevaluation will help reinforce that data that they're collecting a little bit.
So it's at a much higher level, what they're
Right.
collecting. This is gonna drill right down. How many buildings do we have? How many units are there in those buildings? We don't have that information,
Right,
but they're gonna look at it, the consultants are looking at it from a market perspective. Based on the information that's available through the market,
Mhm.
what do we know? And through what people have replied through the census.
so next month they're gonna be doing some stakeholder meetings and we're gonna use this group as one of them.
That'd be
Great.
great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
We won't cancel next meeting.
Yeah.
We joke there's always one meeting in the summer that gets canceled.
Think of
Tends to be
July.
July.
That's fine by me, honestly. My question is, are they looking at this data? Are they also looking at who these properties are owned and managed by?
Not
Is that-
HR, not HRNA,
Okay,
but the
that's
reval will.
the reval
The
will. So,
reval will determine ownership.
so we're gonna figure out also how many properties are managed by these property management companies.
That will come up through the whatever the
Okay.
and we're gonna be able to get some of that out of the registry, especially the pilot piece.
Okay,
We can't, the reval may not get to the manager, but we'd have to ask Phil. I'm not sure what, through the assessing process, they need to capture. I don't believe the management company is part of that. It would be ownership, layout, configuration, number of units.
okay,
rental registry is more about who's your local manager
that makes sense.
for the pilot.
Yeah, I'm just, because I feel like that's an important piece of the
Yep.
data to look at as well, especially when you're looking at quality.
Is it the
Yeah.
out-of-state investor?
Yeah,
Asset
or
landlord.
is it just a property management conglomerate?
Correct.
Because, yeah, like, they're overwhelmed.
Well, I was just gonna kind of build off that, which is, do you find that these property management companies are involved in any of these housing processes? Like, are they saying, yeah, we've got 500 properties that we rent, not obviously providing specifics, but are they offering any sort of information, any data?
I would, I think Ann invited, sorry. I think Ann's folks had invited some to some of the stakeholder meetings and I believe they've come.
Yeah, when we did some landlord stakeholder meetings and we did a lot of outreach and we had 2 meetings
Mhm.
and probably dozen at each different managers and owners, so that worked out really well, really helped us to try to come up with a pilot program that was sort of a win-win. That'll give us information and have possible access to block grant funds and, yeah. So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the reason why I asked is because Maine Real Estate Management, for example, has almost 4,000 properties throughout the state. I don't know how many they have or they manage within the Bangor city limits, but I know they have about 4,000 throughout the state. And for all of those 4,000, they have a total of about 5 property manager, not property manager people, but maintenance workers. Like, that's a pretty good example as to why we see so many properties in disrepair, because they just cannot get to them. So
Mm.
finding out who's actually managing these properties and who's in charge, that'll provide some solutions.
I think we do get to some of that through the pilot. I'm just trying to think
yeah,
about
through
what's
the
on the
pilot
form.
program, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the citywide reevaluation? That's gonna take longer, right?
Yes.
That's over a
Yes.
couple of years?
2 years.
Okay, that's what I
Correct.
yeah, and that is one where they're actually going to home verifying.
Correct,
This
And
is a
there's-
3-bedroom with one, you know.
correct. And they are going to ask to enter properties.
Mhm.
People do not have to allow them. But the appraisers would like to get in and they'll try to make contact with
Mhm.
people. And the first informational session for that is, I believe, Thursday this week at the Down East School,
Yes,
I believe is the first session.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pull it up on my.
calendar here.
And that's basically explaining to them what's happening, what to
Yeah.
expect if someone comes in.
Correct, what people, so they'll be particular, they're gonna have vehicles. They're gonna be labeled, the individual will have an ID badge, so that if anybody ever had any concern about. Is this person real or legit, they'll be able to call.
What is on the ID badge? Is it City of Bangor? Who, do we know what that's gonna say? Sorry.
I don't know that I listened to that much detail when the assessor presented it, I'm not gonna lie. I can find you the links. Why can I not get back to home?
Cause certainly when those questions comes up, you
Yeah.
know, helpful to.
There we go, there we go. So they're gonna walk through all of that at these informational sessions, and yes, the first one is Thursday at Down East School. The next one is let's see. Looks like. I don't know what, oh, the next one is June 11th. And that one is at the William S. Cullen School. I think they were working on a meeting at the Dowdy School, trying to be in all of the neighborhoods. And they were looking to add a fourth option for Zoom. So that if folks can't make it to a location, that they still have an opportunity to go. And to participate. Those are the only two I can see right now.
Any other questions from the committee for Anne about housing? Comes up every meeting, that's good.
Yeah,
I tell Anne she should just stay here every meeting. just-
Yeah.
Can I give a plug to Grandview meeting tomorrow?
Yes, you can.
I always like to give a plug for our public meetings. We're having a design charrette. We're bringing in design professionals to work with the public to come up with some different layouts, or at least understand how those decisions are made for the lot on Grandview Ave that the city owns, that we're proposing to do a housing development on. So the public's invited. It's gonna be at Husson at the Dyke Family Center at 5 o'clock. There'll be refreshments, 5 to 7.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone questions? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, you're welcome to stay if you want to. I don't think there's much left on the agenda. Like, I'm out.
Do you?
Got a long afternoon. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ian,
Oh,
will
sure.
you put this one back there?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, I took it off the.
We'll
handle
see you
up
at the
there.
next meeting, right? With the,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, she'll be here at the next meeting.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You
Wait,
too.
Anne, do you know how to spell charrette off the top of your head?
Yes, CHARRETTE.
Wow, thank you very much. I remember last time we talked about that word,
We're like-
but I did not spell it right the last time either.
All
I
right.
still have to Google it every now. and
I'm,
then.
right. We have no policies tonight, so we will move on to subcommittee work. Was there anything that came out of the accessibility, anything bubbling to the surface?
I do like the idea of adding some of those thoughts on disability inclusion to the accessibility work.
So while she was speaking, what I got thinking about is maybe it's an opportunity to meet with the chamber and the
Oh.
downtown business and downtown Bangor partnership. To try to talk to those folks about what would be helpful
Yeah,
for the city to be able to support, or to hear what other programs some of them may already have in place.
yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Do you want me to try to connect you all?
Yeah, that would,
Okay.
I would love that opportunity.
All right. I will do
Around the
that.
word, kind of like the idea of like a symposium type. thing.
I do too. I really think that would be really great. I know we have so many companies in Bangor that already hire people with disabilities. And I think that to your point, it's so much more of like a stigma break and sharing actual anecdotal or, lived experience. That can help people understand, obviously the benefits and really what stigmas they might be working up against if they're afraid to hire someone with a disability. So I think the symposium could act as a really great opportunity to just information share.
Yeah, like bite-sized nuggets of information. I think that, when.
And like
Cara-
experiences of, this is,
Well, to what Cara was saying, I think many people are just unsure of what they can and can't do. So in the absence of information, they just don't do.
or
Right.
assume that it's going to be so much more of a lift than it actually is, right?
If there's a way that we can help facilitate that kind of.
Yeah, so I will connect Katie and Catherine
Catherine.
with
Awesome.
Deb Newman at the Chamber
Okay.
and with Betsy Lundy at the DVP.
Awesome. That's
Okay.
great, thank you.
Okay.
I also know for the accessibility piece that updates to the website were shared with Courtney before May 6th. So I don't know when it would be appropriate to, like, how that process is looking for the website or.
Oh, we're trying to, we're a long way. It'll be later this summer as we get through some stuff
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was just asking when would be appropriate to get another update
later this.
later
summer.
this summer.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know if you understood what I
Yeah,
was.
no, I did. I finally got there.
Yeah.
So for the first thing we're doing is we're rolling out what's referred to as C-Click Fix.
Yeah.
So, because we currently have a bit of a wonky
Yes.
Yeah.
work order and system where people can provide information as to services that need to be attended to. So the first thing we're really focused on is getting the C-Click Fix out because we can actually put that link right on our current website.
Yeah, I'm excited. I went to, just off topic really quickly. My sisters and brothers and I went to Salem, Massachusetts this weekend, which was so random, but we were on a ghost tour and they were telling us how they have C-Click Fix in Salem and how people will use it to like post creepy things. And I was like,
wow.
well, Bangor, Maine is rolling out C-Click.
So that's kind of our near-term thing that we're trying to get out and
Awesome.
underway.
That's
Yeah.
great. I'm excited for that.
I was gonna say that, I remember she had mentioned that last time and that, when Jason unfortunately wasn't here, one things we were saying is with that equity index and all that stuff, because she had kind of mentioned later in the summer, that gives them plenty of time to kind of start looking not just at the
Yeah.
equity index, but some of those other surveys and things that are used.
Right, is that the measuring stick
Right.
that we ought to be
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
looking to use, or is there a different measuring stick we ought
Yeah.
to consider?
I mean, she only asked us a couple of weeks ago what layout we preferred, so that's why I'm like, we're,
I know. I just wanted to make sure.
you're ready.
I'm excited. I want to make sure that we're as supportive as we can too, right? I don't want it to just be like once in a while we drop in or like be like a Monday morning quarterback about the whole thing. I want to be as.
But, I mean, to
supportive as
Kara's
possible.
point, that's why we've been coming to the committee.
Yeah, yeah.
Is we want to do it
Thoughtfully.
thoughtfully and
Intentionally.
from the get-go. Because it's not like we're just moving our website, because our website is so old and
I know.
antiquated.
No.
We're getting to start fresh.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Let's move on to events and education update on Bangor Pride.
Yeah, so good news and bad news. Good news is that I did end up submitting the application and we did get approved for a table. That's good news. The bad news is that I am unable to get that time off from work.
Okay.
So usually I work weekends and I will be unavailable that day. I'll be lucky if I can get out for an hour just to
I'm
go.
sorry
visit.
they
Oh,
have
I'm
to
so
work that
sad.
day.
I'm so sad. I went to request it and found out that half the office is going to a coworker's wedding. That's not a gay wedding, unfortunately. It's a straight wedding, but regardless, I can't get that time off. So I don't know how we're gonna manage the staffing of the table,
I
but
think we should probably, there'd be no issue with us doing an email sign up for that.
Oh,
right?
gosh, no.
Okay.
And that's what I just put, so I now have my second email.
thank you.
I have one for the Chamber DPP and the second is for Pride Table.
What is the timing of the table?
Oh, God, I think it's.
It's
like
it's
10.
11 to 4.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, probably be
Hopefully
there
we
to
have
set it
someone
up
on the
like
board.
10-ish.
And were we looking to do the same thing that we did last year with the slip?
I think that's a good way of doing
Is
it.
there something else?
So there was like a one sheet about what it is we, do, and how to
Yeah.
learn more about this committee. And then there was also just this sort of like big butcher block where people
Right.
could write, you
Right,
know.
there's, you can share.
Yeah, yeah.
Did we want to do
Butcher
the same
paper,
thing this
not
week?
butcher flag. Yeah,
Something
I think I
that-
actually still have a lot of those flyers printed out.
Yeah,
So that
and
would be-
I think people enjoyed it and we had a lot of engagement with people, so that's why I'm sad I won't be there.
We had a couple of different activities.
Yeah,
too.
friendship
People could make
bracelets were one
bracelets
of
and
them
stuff, yeah,
and
so-
Those are just popsicles, if it's gonna be a warm day.
yeah,
I hope so.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
we'll get that email passed around and maybe if there's some of the people who are involved with staffing or if other people have ideas for activities they want to do that, we can.
Yeah, because even if we just have like I can do setup, I can sit there for an hour, I can sit there, you know, rotate.
Yeah. That's all
Okay.
it needs to be, is
And-
just an hour or two.
And if you need anything printed, just let us know.
Oh my gosh.
We have a print shop
I have a budget.
and we have a print shop.
Alrighty, don't think there's anything we need to do
No.
with the review of the calendar, that's
That's
just on there. Was there anything under the Human Resources Subcommittee? I don't think
Nope.
so. Okay, anything under the Housing Subcommittee? Nope. Equity Index, any update on that? Nope. Okay.
Yeah.
I know Jason was kind of leading the charge, but if, if others want to, I feel like if others start doing their own independent thing, that might move things along a little bit. So just throwing that out there for the committee. Okay, we will move on to number 5. Any other business, any items from other committee members they'd like to share?
No.
Yeah, it was this awkward pause.
Yeah.
It was like.
No, it's just.
No.
Waiting?
It was very empathetic.
Yeah.
It's because I wanted to talk about the committee meeting for next month.
Okay.
Okay.
We
So
can
you
talk
did
about
have
it if
something you
want
wanted to talk
yeah.
about.
It's because I'm gonna be out of town and I was wondering if we could either reschedule it or,
Oh,
um,
let's see now.
I actually think I'm gonna be out of town that week as well.
Then we should probably change it.
is it
So that's
scheduled for
what-
the 25th, right?
It is.
Mhm.
Now we're getting into summer.
Right, this
Which-
is, yeah.
Always makes things.
Are we able to do it the week before?
Fine by me.
It's the 18th. That should be no problem.
Kids are in school.
I was just gonna say,
Well, the problem with the 18th is we haven't, oh, no,
Well, wasn't that group coming at the next meeting?
yeah,
Yeah,
they were gonna come on the 25th.
Are they local or would they be coming?
No,
in?
they'd be zooming in.
Oh.
I can check with Ann and see if they could zoom in on the 18th. We would have to be, the problem will be is that we have a planning board meeting in here at 7.
So would it be an issue if we started earlier?
I think we started later for Theron. A lot of
And he
times, the
said
school
that-
should be out
Mhm.
by then.
I
The
talked to
last
him
day
today.
is the 17th.
Yeah.
he said that it will be better. Yeah,
Okay.
just,
June 15th, they'll be out of school by then.
17th,
Oh, 17th, okay.
yeah. 17th is the
As
last
parents,
day, I
we know.
believe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I see that now. Okay.
Do you want to try
5:30 then.
5:30? Because I know folks need time to,
Can we put that in an email to
Yes.
everyone and see if?
and
that
actually what
presents an
we'll do, yes.
Let's just put that on everyone's-
June 18th.
Should we just plan for the 18th until we hear otherwise?
I think there's a majority here, and I think you should plan on the 18th.
Okay, and there'll be a
And-
calendar invite that goes out.
Correct, and what
Okay.
I'll do is we'll
And I
have
don't
them
need to worry about
update that. I'll have them update the other
That
one,
feels like.
and I will
17th.
verify with the consultants that they can do it on the 18th, and it's actually good timing, because the 17th, they're gonna do it with B and ED.
Mhm. Oh, that'd be great. So to that, we had discussed earlier, the potential of not doing a July meeting. Everyone's very busy doing
Yep.
things. In this group, is there any thoughts or feelings about not having a July meeting?
Fine by me.
Doesn't affect me.
By the way, it's fine with me. I'm gonna be around, so.
Okay,
You know, I mean,
we're gonna cancel the July
There you
meeting.
go.
Everyone can enjoy.
Yeah.
okay.
Who canceled this month? 2 months. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up? I don't know, do you wanna, school committee?
Yeah.
We have a new superintendent?
Oh, yeah. Yes, so two updates actually from the school committee. One is that our next school committee meeting on June 12th, the DEIB subcommittee from the Bangor School Department will be giving a full update of their year in review. So I'm happy to provide information about that on our June 18th meeting, or if you want to log in, it's going to be a really comprehensive review of the work that they've done over this past year. But more importantly, more excitingly, the Bangor School Committee has officially selected our incoming superintendent. Our current superintendent's last day is June 30th, and our new superintendent is Dr. Marie Robinson. She has amazing accolades, starting with a education school teacher in Philadelphia for about 20 years. And then she moved to Northern Maine, where she was a superintendent in Medway, and most recently Katahdin. Katahdin has some incredible stats coming out of it, keeping in mind that they are a very small district, right? That said, they earned the best school lunch program because of the relationship they have with local farmers. They have a really robust education and outdoor program. Just some really neat things that they're doing there that are easily transferable, even in a larger district like Bangor. Outside of the fact that Dr. Robinson, obviously having the majority of her career been in a very large school district in Philadelphia. She has just this really wide breadth of experience and a really, really warm demeanor that I think is going to be really great for our schools. So I'm very pleased with the committee's decision.
And when does she start?
July 1st.
And when can we get her into our meetings?
Oh, July.
No, maybe it's
August,
July.
that's right.
No, I would also say August might be difficult.
Yeah.
So on behalf
Gonna
of
be
the
like.
superintendent who is gearing up to
Yeah.
open a new school year. I think August and September are gonna be a little
Mhm.
dicey, would
Yeah.
be my guess.
What I would say, even if it, like, not even necessarily a report out, just even like, if we could even have her come in and, introduce herself or anything like that.
Just a meet and greet.
Yeah.
Yeah, she will be having a community meet and greet. She's obviously gonna be the one
Right.
determining that date. And I think that would also be a great opportunity.
And you can share that, cause I'm
I
betting
can.
you know.
Hopefully I'll have that on my calendar. May or may not remember. Just kidding. I'll keep you guys updated. But yeah, I definitely would love to have her come in, and I think it really lends us the opportunity to be more thoughtful about our collaboration with the school DIB committee and their work, and more opportunities for overlap.
For sure. Anything else from the subcommittees or I'm sorry, not subcommittees, but anyone else from any other community members, things that might be happening that might be useful for the community, for the committee? Guys, it's time to go home. Seeing none, I'm gonna go to Debbie and ask. if there's
So
any
some of the
updates.
updates, I feel like I've already kind of shared the updates. The city council is in the process of, we're gonna start finalizing our budget here over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm hoping it's less than that. Because,
Yeah, that would be nice.
it would be nice. We work collaboratively with the school department to help find some ways to help mitigate the impact of the property taxpayers. The council is very concerned about the residents' ability to pay taxes.
Yeah.
We're gonna have final value discussion tomorrow night, so we'll have a better sense of where we are. And we've got some smaller changes to make, so we'll see where the council feels. What the next steps may be, depending on, I think we're still waiting for 1 or 2 pieces of information, so it becomes very hard to try to make a decision or a recommendation when you don't have everything in front of you, so we're wrapping up the budget process hopefully soon.
So, with the budget that you all have proposed, not having final numbers, is there an idea of what that actual final dollar value is to a person in Bangor, if that budget were to increase, be approved. It's
$370 on the average household.
Okay.
Feels, that was before the changes, that was only after the schools changes.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow night, we're gonna talk about what that looks like now that we have final value and other potential changes that we've looked at on the city side. It started at $431.
Yeah, the city was very helpful in keeping the school costs down. Thank you very much. We went
It's
from like
been
a
back
nearly 7% increase to a 5.3% increase with
It's
the
been
city
back
support,
for.
so. Just
So-
helping us bond some of our large capital projects, like renovations to the schools and some of that deferred maintenance. So it's really helpful that we didn't have to put that on the taxpayers.
So we're wrapping up the budget process, we talked about housing, what else am I thinking?
Anything coming on? This committee hasn't
my
spoken.
vacation.
I know this committee hasn't talked about Juneteenth because
Oh,
it's always
gosh, yes.
been. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. It's been one of those things where we thought maybe it would be more about collaborating with other groups and organizations. I'm not sure if anyone on the events and education subcommittee has thought about that or seen anything that could be shared, you know.
Did see, from the commission, the state commission, that the NAACP in Bangor had been awarded some funding related to the Juneteenth celebration. But if I go to their Bangor page, I don't see any events listed, so I'm not quite sure if they're working in concert. I think in Ellsworth it's
Yeah.
started out, so I don't know if it's a collaboration.
I know that,
Friends with Michael? No, okay.
I know that Bangor's NAACP chapter did always host the Juneteenth Down East in
Mhm.
Ellsworth.
Yeah.
So.
So maybe that is
That's
where
where
the
the
money
funding was
went.
awarded,
Yeah.
but
But along that same line, tomorrow night, obviously, the city council will be doing a proclamation in recognition of Pride Month. So later this week, early next week, the sidewalks, the crosswalk will be painted, the banners will be up, the sign top will be up. On our first council meeting in June, which is June 10th, there will be a proclamation in recognition of Juneteenth as well.
Okay.
awesome.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the date on that one?
June 10th.
I would say if anyone sees anything that might be helpful for like the city to advertise or promote as activities, that's definitely something we want to pass along because I do agree. I feel like the social media
Right.
has really improved lately. I definitely, I love seeing on the agenda this week, things we're discussing this week. I'm like, oh, okay, now I know that's happening with,
That's correct.
business development. So I think, any time that we can leverage that, because we belong to so many different groups and organizations that anything we hear, we can move along. But with that being said too, if there's anything in the distance, that's part of the reason why we created that city calendar as well, is so that if there's anything in the future that we could be
Right.
moving along to the city or, collaborating with, that's also helpful to be looking at as well.
When it might be, I'm wondering if it might be a good opportunity, and if this feels like it's coming from left field, I apologize. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to kind of maybe meet and chat with, especially, with the events and education, is to connect with the library.
Yeah,
Because the library does a lot of great programming. And maybe there's a way to help build that up or lend a
Promote
voice
it.
to it, correct?
Or, not necessarily sponsor it, because, we have funds to sponsor things, but
Right,
maybe, help organize or
correct, or
Or,
participate or
find speakers.
bring it forward as an opportunity to discuss, because the library does seem to do a really good job at looking at it. And especially from an educational and event standpoint, and if we can amplify the existing events,
Mhm.
that would be great.
Yeah,
that
that's
would be a
good idea.
huge win.
That's a good idea.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
Juneteenth is tough because it seems like in the last few years, the pride, June has been,
Yeah.
there's more and more, I mean, I think there's like 20 or 25 different pride events in Maine alone
Well,
this month, coming up in June. And so it just sort of overshadows
It's
everything.
overshadowed.
Yeah.
well, I also think it goes back to part of the previous conversation about inclusiveness, which is, I think there's still so many who don't actually understand what Juneteenth is.
Right.
And last year, did we post something on this, on, any of the social media feed about?
Yeah, we've done a proclamation for for Juneteenth since, it came forward.
Just also
Yeah.
every time opportunity to make sure we are the history, the actual meaning of it,
Mhm.
I agree. I don't think people understand
Yeah,
Well,
the significance of the day.
no, they don't, but, it was, 3 or 4 years ago that Northern Light added
Mhm.
Juneteenth as a holiday to the calendar.
Mhm.
I mean,
Official.
we all follow along
It's
with the
always
state.
been like a
Yeah.
state holiday.
so it's still, to that point, it's still
Still
new.
live.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still new,
A
yeah.
lot of education
So,
happening. with that.
People heard about it, but to your point, how much do they know about it?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that's my 5th email for events and education, connecting to the Bangor Public Library and seeing if we can. They do
Great.
I follow their page, someone was like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but if there's a way to encourage businesses, if, some places have wonderful window fronts. Having some sort of educational piece in window fronts for those who are willing and interested.
And I would say to you, that's part of the conversation with the downtown Bangor partnership.
yeah.
They do a pretty robust, they do a lot of cultural arts
Mhm.
and fun events.
Yeah,
Not that,
For
and I think they would also be very open to other things.
Yeah.
What it is about, it's about bringing people downtown and creating an opportunity to interact.
Mhm. All right, anything else?
No, that was the thing that jogged my memory.
Mhm.
Unless you have questions for me.
No, that's great, thank you.
Okay.
Any remaining questions, comments, or as my teacher used to say, scathing rebuttals?
I move we adjourn.
Second. Seeing no one saying let's stay forever, meeting's adjourned.
Okay.